Welcome back, you night owls. Tonight we ease into a journey far older than recorded history, a trip back to the very moment your ancestors' minds first whispered, "Something is wrong here." You're not safe in a cozy bed, you're huddled in the flickering firelight of a prehistoric cave, the smell of wood smoke and damp earth in your nostrils. You can hear the low, guttural sounds of your family around you, the gentle snores of a child. But just beyond the circle of warmth, where the shadows swallow the trees, something is moving. It's too upright to be an animal, too slow to be a predator. It looks almost like one of you, but the way its head is tilted, the strange stilted gait, it makes the hairs on your neck stand up. You probably won't survive this kind of encounter, and neither did many of your ancestors who failed to heed that primal alarm. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You close your eyes, and in the darkness, you're no longer in a modern room. You're walking on a dry, sun-baked plain, the kind of landscape that carves wrinkles into the faces of the ancient. The air is thick with the scent of wild grasses and the distant promise of rain. You're part of a small group, a family, moving slowly across this vast, empty stage. You glance over at your young son, his hand clutched in yours, and you smile at the familiar pattern of his face. His small, perfect features, the nose, the eyes, the curve of his cheek, all fit together in a way that your brain recognizes as safe, as yours. This is the baseline, the biological signature of belonging. It's an unconscious calculation, a flash of recognition so quick you don't even register it as thought. Your brain processes the nuances of his face and registers a quiet, profound sense of rightness. Now imagine the unsettling counterpoint. Your tribe is resting near a watering hole. The sun is setting, painting the sky in fiery streaks of orange and purple. A figure emerges from the trees. It's walking upright, like one of your people. Your brain begins its rapid, subconscious scan. The shape of the skull is a little off, not quite the smooth dome of a modern human. The eyes are set too deep. The mouth doesn't seem to have the same flexibility, the same ability to smile or frown in a way you understand. The figure is almost, but not quite, human. A low hum of dread starts in the pit of your stomach, a biological alarm bell ringing loudly in your mind. This is the Uncanny Valley, a concept coined by roboticist Masahiro Mori in 1970. He theorized that as a robot's appearance becomes more human, our emotional response grows increasingly positive. But at a certain point, a critical tipping point, a slight imperfection in that resemblance can cause a sudden, sharp dip into revulsion and unease. Historians still argue whether this feeling of the uncanny is a learned cultural response or a deeply embedded evolutionary mechanism. Tonight, we're going to explore the latter. We're going to treat this theory not as a modern quirk of robotics, but as a foundational pillar of human evolution. You see, the Uncanny Valley wasn't born in a sterile lab. It was forged in the wild, messy and often brutal crucible of our prehistoric past. It was a tool, a psychological Swiss Army knife designed to keep you alive. Think about it. Why would your brain be wired to feel such profound unease at something that looks nearly human? One mainstream historical fact you might find in a dusty textbook is that early humans, like Homo erectus and Homo sapiens, existed alongside other hominid species. We weren't alone. There were the Neanderthals, Denisovans, and maybe others we haven't even discovered yet. A casual observer glancing at a Neanderthal from a distance might have seen just another bipedal creature, another face in the crowd. But as they drew closer, the small, subtle differences would begin to manifest. The heavier brow ridge, the larger nose, the different skeletal structure. These were not just aesthetic variations, they were potential red flags. Let's introduce a quirky or fringe tidbit into our sleepy narrative. What if the Uncanny Valley wasn't just about distinguishing species, but about recognizing sickness? Imagine a small, isolated tribe. A viral pathogen sweeps through, causing a strange, debilitating illness. The infected don't die immediately, they just change. Their skin sags, their eyes lose focus, their faces become slack and empty. To a healthy person, they look almost the same, but not quite. They've fallen into the valley. Your brain, with its ancient programming, would be screaming, "Stay away! Contagion! Danger!" That feeling of revulsion isn't an intellectual judgment. It's a gut-level, non-verbal warning that says, this person is sick. They could make you sick too. Or they could be a threat to the tribe's gene pool. It's the ultimate biological quarantine system. So as you walk through this ancient landscape, you're constantly performing this unconscious calculus. You're scanning every face, every movement, every subtle expression for signs of authenticity. Your brain is a finely tuned instrument, a biological Geiger counter for the almost human. The sight of a familiar face brings a wave of calm, a signal that you're among kin, among safety. The sight of a distorted face, a mask, or a stranger with a strange gait sends a jolt of anxiety, a primal warning that says, this is not one of us. This is a potential threat. It's not about malice or animosity. It's about survival. You don't have time to stop and analyse the moral character of the stranger. Your brain has to make an instant decision. A quick, sharp, and often deeply unsettling judgment call. Think about how this played out in the daily grind of early human life. Every interaction with a stranger, every glimpse of a creature moving on two legs through the tall grass, was a potential plunge into the valley. Maybe you remember that crocodile dung sunscreen from our last chat. It's a silly, modern-day reminder of how we're built to be aware of the small things. The same goes for the uncanny valley. The slight wobble of a head, the glint of an eye that seems just a little too blank, the rigid posture of a figure that should be relaxed. These are the details that our ancient ancestors' lives depended on noticing. It's why we're so fascinated with clowns and mannequins, with dolls and with CGI that just isn't quite right. We're drawn to them because they tap into that ancient well of unease, that feeling that we're looking at something that is not what it pretends to be. It's a feeling that says, I am a human being, and this is an imposter. And for your ancestors, that realization could mean the difference between life and death. The feeling of unease settles over you like a thick fog. That primordial shiver you felt at the sight of a figure that was almost, but not quite, human. It wasn't just a fleeting sensation. It was a catalyst. It was the moment your ancestors' minds started to play with the idea of creating their own versions of this uncanny sensation. You're no longer on the open plains, but in a dusty, dimly lit clearing. You see a man, one of your tribal elders, his hands stained with ochre and clay. He's not shaping a tool, not a spear point or a scraping stone. No, he's kneading a lump of clay, his brow furrowed in intense concentration. You lean in, your breath catching in your throat as the form begins to take shape. It's a small figurine, a doll, but unlike anything you've ever seen. The head is a simplified oval, the body a lumpy cylinder, but the eyes. He's pressed two small stones into the clay, two tiny black pebbles that stare back at you with a chillingly blank expression. This, my friend, is the birth of the first faux humans. It's a mainstream historical fact that some of the earliest known human artifacts dating back tens of thousands of years are not weapons or tools but small, often abstract, human-like figures. Think of the Venus figurines, those rotund, enigmatic sculptures found across Eurasia. They're a testament to our enduring fascination with the human form. But what if that fascination was intertwined with a deeper, more unsettling impulse? What if these figurines weren't just celebrations of fertility or beauty, but were also early attempts to grapple with the uncanny valley itself? Historians still argue whether these figures were objects of worship, educational tools, or just simple art. But let's look at them through our unique lens. The Venus of Willendorf, for example, is a woman, yes, but she's not realistic. She's a caricature of a human, with exaggerated features and no face. No face. This absence of detail, the refusal to cross the threshold into realism, could be a deliberate choice. Perhaps your ancestors' minds, having been spooked by the almost human, decided to create something safe. A figure that was human enough to be relatable but abstract enough to avoid plunging into that terrifying valley of almost but not quite. It's like a child drawing a stick figure before they attempt a full portrait. They're dealing with the concept of a person, but not the unnerving reality of a specific individual. A stick figure can't stare back at you with dead eyes. A Venus figurine can't make you question its humanity. Now for a quirky or fringe tidbit, consider the Lion Man of Hohenstein-Stadel, a prehistoric ivory sculpture dating back around 40,000 years. It's a bipedal figure with a human body and a lion's head. It's a hybrid, a creature that transcends the familiar. It's not human, it's not a lion, it's something entirely different. Could this be another way your ancestors navigated the Uncanny Valley? By deliberately creating figures that were so wildly different from a normal human form that they couldn't possibly be mistaken for one? It's a creative solution to a terrifying problem. Instead of risking the creation of an almost human monster, they created a mythological hero. The Lion Man doesn't look like a sick person, or an enemy tribe member, or a stranger with a genetic abnormality. It looks like a spirit, a god, a powerful force of nature. It's in its own category, a glorious detour around the revulsion that a slightly off-human effigy might create. It's the difference between trying to draw a perfect circle and just drawing a funky star instead. The star might not be what you set out to create, but at least it won't be a lumpy, imperfect circle that makes you feel a little queasy. As you watch the elder work on his clay figure, you realise this isn't just art. It's a conversation with the fear itself. He's taking the abstract idea of a person and giving it a physical form, but he's doing it in a way that feels safe. He's deliberately avoiding the meticulous details, the folds of skin, the individual hairs, the precise shape of a nostril that would push the figure from an interesting object into an unsettling one. Remember that feeling from the last section when you saw the nearly human stranger? The elder is trying to make sure his creations never evoke that same gut punch of dread. It's a kind of psychological armour, a way of asserting control over a feeling that would otherwise feel chaotic and uncontrollable. You see this trend repeated again and again. You trudge through a forest and you stumble upon a crude wooden carving, a doll perhaps, left behind by another group. Its face is a simple series of gouges, a shallow circle for the head, 2 lines for eyes, 1 for a mouth. It's undeniably a human figure, but it's so rudimentary that it can't possibly be mistaken for a real person. This is the art of the intentional uncanny avoidance. The creators of these objects seem to be instinctively aware that to get too close to realism is to invite fear. Think of it this way. Your brain is a highly sophisticated pattern recognition machine. When it sees something that is almost a familiar pattern, but with subtle, crucial differences, it flags it as a potential threat. It's like a computer program that encounters a corrupt file. It doesn't know what it is, and it can't process it correctly, so it flags it for deletion or quarantine. These early human artists were instinctively creating files that were so simple and so pure that they couldn't be corrupted. They were making human-shaped icons, not human replicas. There's a kind of gentle, sleepy sarcasm in this whole process, isn't there? Our ancestors, facing down woolly mammoths and saber-toothed cats, were also grappling with the existential terror of a badly carved stick figure. It's a reminder that our fears aren't always about the biggest threats. Sometimes they're about the most insidious ones, the ones that are a little too close to home. It's a bit like us being scared of a flickering light bulb or a creepy clown. We know, on a rational level, that they're harmless, but on a deeper, more primal level, they're tapping into something far older and more powerful, and that feeling, that deep-seated unease, is what allowed the Uncanny Valley to become a powerful tool. It's what gave our ancestors a way to talk about things that were wrong. A person who was sick, a stranger from a different tribe, a creature that moved just a little too strangely. Before they had a vocabulary for genetics or disease or difference, they had a feeling, and they had a way to represent that feeling, to give it form. The first faux humans, those unsettlingly simple clay figures with their dead-eyed stares, were the first step in a long, slow journey toward understanding the very nature of what it means to be human. They weren't just objects. They were the first whisperings of a language of fear. You're still in the dusty clearing, the elder's work now finished. The small clay figure lies on a rock, its blank stare somehow more potent in the gathering dusk. As night falls, you and your tribe retreat to the shelter of the cave, the air growing colder with each passing moment. A fire is kindled, its orange glow licking at the darkness, casting long dancing shadows on the walls. It's here, in this ancient theatre of light and shade, that the Uncanny Valley finds its true stage. The flicker of the flames makes everything move, everything waver. A familiar face across the fire can suddenly seem alien, the shadows playing tricks with the contours of a cheek, the hollow of an eye. The Uncanny Valley isn't just a biological response to a static object. It's an experience amplified by uncertainty and movement. This is a mainstream historical fact, though perhaps a sleepy one. Fire was a revolutionary technology for our ancestors. It provided warmth, protection, and a means to cook food. But it also transformed our social lives. The campfire became the heart of the tribe, a place for stories, for bonding, for teaching. And with the stories came the shadows. A storyteller gesturing wildly could turn their own hand into a monster on the cave wall. A simple piece of driftwood could become a twisted, gnarled effigy. These flickering, temporary moments of the uncanny were the perfect training ground for our brains. They taught us to be perpetually on guard, to question what we were seeing, to understand that not everything that looks human is human. Now for a quirky or fringe tidbit. Imagine those early human masks. Simple things perhaps made of wood or bark, with holes for eyes and a gash for a mouth. When worn by a tribal member around the fire, their features obscured by the mask, their identity hidden, a profound and unsettling transformation takes place. The mask itself is crude, maybe even childlike in its simplicity. But the fact that it's attached to a living, moving person, a person you know, whose face is just inches behind that lifeless facade, creates a powerful sense of unease. The body language is familiar, but the face is a void, a blank slate that refuses to communicate. It's a living example of the uncanny valley, a demonstration that the human brain relies on subtle cues of expression and identity to feel safe. Remove those cues, and you've created a monster. These masks weren't just for ritual. They were a psychological weapon, a way of intentionally harnessing the fear of the unknown. They turned a trusted friend into an unsettling other, and back again, teaching the tribe a lesson in trust and perception. Historians still argue whether these masks were for spiritual rites, for intimidation, or for pure entertainment. But you, sitting there in the firelight, see the truth. You see the child in your tribe, huddled closer to their mother, their eyes wide as the shaman puts on a wooden mask with empty sockets. The shaman is just a person, of course. You know them. You shared a laugh with them just an hour ago. But the firelight makes the mask's face seem to shift and move. The lack of expression on the mask is more terrifying than any angry grimace. It's the void, the nothingness, the absence of humanity that makes your heart pound. This is the uncanny valley made manifest. It's the terror of seeing something you thought you knew and realizing you don't know it at all. You probably wouldn't survive a world without fire. The cold, the predators, it's too much. But the fire gave you more than just warmth. It gave you a place to create and explore your fears in a controlled environment. The stories told around the fire often featured beings that were almost human. Goblins with twisted legs, spirits with eyes that glowed in the dark, creatures that mimicked the human voice but got the words wrong. These stories, passed down from generation to generation, weren't just for entertainment. They were cautionary tales, oral blueprints for what to look out for in the wild. They were a way of giving a name and a narrative to that deep, gut-wrenching feeling of the uncanny. The uncanny valley then became a storytelling device, a tool for building community and shared understanding. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen? Don't forget to put it on. Remember that feeling when we saw the stranger? Here's a story to help us understand it. The stories gave shape to the fear, and in doing so made it a little less terrifying. They turned a chaotic biological response into a cultural touchstone. The feeling of revulsion became a shared understanding, a collective warning system. It's a bit like a modern movie with a jump scare. You know it's coming. You know it's not real, but it still makes you jump. Your ancestors were the first directors of these psychological thrillers, using the flicker of the firelight and the simple power of a shared story to tap into that ancient well of unease. And it's a gentle, sleepy kind of terror too, isn't it? The kind that makes your eyes feel heavy but keeps your mind from fully shutting down. The fire hums, the voices are low, and the shadows dance. The feeling isn't a scream, it's a whisper. It's the quiet, persistent question that haunts your subconscious. What is human? What is not? Where is the line? You watch your fellow tribe members, their faces softened and distorted by the firelight, and for a fleeting second, you see the mask on their face. You see the stranger on the plain. And then the fire shifts, the shadows recede, and their faces are familiar again. The moment passes. The uncanny valley retreats for now. But you know it's always there, waiting in the shadows, waiting for the light to flicker and the world to look a little wrong again. This dance between light and dark, between the familiar and the uncanny, was as much a part of early human life as hunting or gathering. It was how we learned to navigate the subtle and dangerous world around us, a world full of things that were almost, but not quite human. The firelight flickers, and you find yourself in a different kind of darkness. No longer the cosy cave, you're now standing over a small stream, your eyes scanning the water's surface. It's not a predator you're looking for, but a reflection. As the still water of a small pool finally settles, you see your own face, but it's not quite right. A bit distorted by the ripples, a little wavering, it looks almost, but not quite like you. And there it is again, that small, uncomfortable jolt of unease. This feeling, this uncanny valley, isn't just about a stranger from another tribe or a strange mask. It's a deep-seated biological aversion, a warning system with roots far older than any storytelling around a fire. A mainstream historical fact. We are highly evolved to detect signs of sickness, disease, and genetic anomaly in others. Our brains are hardwired to look for symmetry, for clear skin, for signs of vitality. When you look at someone with a rash, a feverish glaze in their eyes, or a distorted limb, your brain registers it as a threat. It's an unconscious but powerful signal to maintain distance, to protect yourself and your group from a potential contagion. This is a crucial survival mechanism. You probably won't survive a plague if you don't heed these subtle warnings, and your ancestors knew this on a visceral level, long before they had a name for bacteria or viruses. Now, imagine this ancient survival mechanism applied to the uncanny valley. The revulsion you feel isn't just a random emotional quirk. It's a profound biological disgust response, a feeling of stay away that's as potent as the smell of rotting meat. It's the sickness of sameness. You see a face that is almost perfect, a head that is almost a normal shape, and your brain screams, "Abomination!" It's not an intellectual thought. It's a gut-level, non-negotiable command. The uncanny valley could very well be an evolutionary mechanism designed to make us avoid individuals who might be carrying a dangerous pathogen, or who have a severe genetic mutation that could be passed on. These individuals, with their slightly off features, would have fallen into the valley. They would have been instinctively ostracized, their genetic lines less likely to propagate, their potential for spreading disease mitigated. Here's a quirky or fringe tidbit for you. Some evolutionary psychologists have posited that this aversion extends not just to physical illness, but to mental and neurological conditions as well. A person with a severe cognitive disorder might have an unsettlingly blank stare, an inability to make normal eye contact, or a peculiar, stilted manner of speech. These subtle deviations from the norm could have been interpreted by our ancestors as signs of something fundamentally wrong, not in a moral sense, but in a survival sense. The uncanny valley would have been their alarm bell, a way of signalling that this person's brain, and therefore their behaviour, was unpredictable and possibly dangerous. We're not talking about a malicious intent, we're talking about an evolutionary response to things that break the rules of normal human interaction. Remember that feeling of unease from the first section, when you saw the almost human figure? That's what we're talking about. It's the quiet suspicion that says, this person is not like me, and that might be a problem. Historians still argue whether our disgust response is a product of culture or biology. But watching your ancestors, you can see it's a bit of both. The disgust for a sick person is biological. The stories told around the fire about the unsettling creatures from the forest. That's culture reinforcing the biology. They're two sides of the same coin. The uncanny valley, then, is the nexus where the two meet. It's the physical manifestation of a biological warning, given a cultural narrative. You look at a person with a slight facial asymmetry, a result of some ancient malady, and your brain recoils. Then, your tribe's stories about a demon with a lopsided face come to mind, and suddenly, that biological revulsion has a name, a context, a face you can point to and say, that's it. That's what the stories are about. Think of the way your own brain reacts to things like masks or puppets. We often describe them as creepy. The word itself is so simple, so visceral. It's not a rational critique, it's a feeling. A puppet, a doll with its painted eyes and plastic smile, is a physical object. But we imbue it with a sense of the uncanny because it taps into this ancient fear. It's a non-living thing that mimics life but does so imperfectly. A broken down doll with a cracked face and one eye missing is a perfect example of something that has fallen squarely into the uncanny valley. It's not a real person, so there's no rational danger. But the biological alarm bells are ringing anyway. They're saying, this face is wrong, this body is wrong, something is terribly, horribly off here. You trudge through the undergrowth, your mind still on that disturbing feeling. You remember how the uncanny valley became a tool for creating our first faux humans, those unsettlingly simple clay figures that deliberately avoided realism. Now, you're seeing the other side of the coin, the evolutionary pressure that made those figures necessary in the first place. Without the biological imperative to avoid things that are off, there would have been no need to create art that was deliberately abstract. The art itself is a response to the fear. It's an attempt to create a perfect form that can't be mistaken for a flawed one. So as you lay your head down and drift off to sleep, consider this. That feeling of unease you get from a creepy doll isn't a modern invention. It's a ghost, a whisper from the past, a leftover instinct from a time when your survival depended on your ability to recognize and recoil from the imperfections of others. It's the sickness of sameness, the deep-seated knowledge that not everything that looks human is healthy, or safe, or even truly human. It's the silent language of our deepest biological fears, a language you've been speaking your entire life without even knowing it. The unease from the last section lingers, a phantom sensation in the back of your mind. You've seen how the uncanny valley could be a response to sickness and disease, a biological warning to keep your distance. But now you find yourself in a different kind of tribe, a smaller, more isolated group huddled together against the vast, indifferent landscape. The faces around you are familiar, but something is changing. There's a subtle variation in the gene pool, a genetic mutation that is quietly altering the features of your people. It's not a disease, not a virus, but a simple, inheritable difference that is slowly, subtly pushing them into the uncanny valley, even for you. A mainstream historical fact is that genetic drift and founder effects were common in early human history. A small group, perhaps a few dozen individuals, would splinter off from a larger tribe to seek new hunting grounds or escape a conflict. This small, isolated population would then interbreed, and over many generations, unique traits, both beneficial and benign, would become more pronounced. A quirky or fringe tidbit is to imagine one of these traits as something that, to an outsider, would look off. Maybe it's a slightly larger head, or eyes set a little too close together. To the members of the tribe, these traits are just normal. They are the faces of their family, their kin. But what happens when an outsider, a lone hunter from a distant, genetically distinct tribe, stumbles upon them? You, as that lone hunter, are walking through the forest tracking a herd of deer. You follow their trail to a small clearing and freeze. There they are. A family, a small group of humans. Relief floods through you for a moment. You're not alone. But as you watch them from a distance, something feels wrong. The children's faces, while undeniably human, have a certain flatness. The adults have an oddly prominent brow bone that casts their eyes in perpetual shadow. They are using tools you recognize. Their body language is human, and their vocalizations are similar to your own, a mix of grunts and clicks. But their faces are a little too smooth, their movements just a little too stiff. Your brain, that finely tuned instrument we've been talking about, performs a rapid scan. It looks for the familiar patterns, the cues that signal safety and belonging, but the patterns are distorted. The symmetry is off. The facial expressions are subtly different, not in a way that's aggressive or threatening, but in a way that is profoundly unsettling. A cold wave of fear washes over you. This isn't the fear of a predator. It's the creeping internal dread of the uncanny valley. These are not monsters. They are humans. But they are wrong. Historians still argue whether early human encounters with different hominid species, like the Neanderthals, which we'll get to in the next section, were marked by conflict or by cooperation. But our story here suggests a more nuanced, and perhaps more powerful, initial reaction: revulsion. It's a bit like seeing a photo of someone you love that's been slightly doctored in Photoshop. You know it's them, but something is so fundamentally off about the image that it makes you feel deeply uncomfortable. That feeling, that sense of a corrupted file, is what your ancestors likely felt when they came across a tribe that had been isolated for too long. The uncanny valley became a psychological barrier to intertribal relationships. Imagine trying to trade with a group whose faces instinctively make you recoil. It would be a non-starter. You would be on edge, your nervous system screaming at you to run away. That feeling would be more powerful than the desire for a better flint blade or a warmer piece of animal hide. This is the uncanny valley as a social divider, a force that silently reinforced tribal boundaries and created a sense of us versus them on a purely visceral level. The fact that you, a modern human, can still feel this way about a realistic but not quite perfect CGI character or a creepy doll is a testament to the power of this ancient instinct. The instinct hasn't gone away because the conditions that created it still exist, even if they're in a different form. We still have genetic conditions, we still have diseases, and we still encounter people who are different from us. The uncanny valley is a reminder that our brains are built to be suspicious of difference, especially when that difference is a little too close to home. So you stand there, frozen, watching this small, slightly off tribe. They haven't noticed you yet. They're just living their lives, unaware that their very faces are a source of profound, existential unease to you. You remember that feeling from the first section, when you saw the almost human stranger? This is the same feeling, but magnified. It's not a single anomaly. It's an entire group of them. It's a whole valley, not just a single person who's fallen into it. You probably wouldn't survive this encounter without a plan. Your mind is racing, your instincts are screaming, danger! But you have no idea why. There's no physical threat. There's no hostility. Just a subtle wrongness. The uncanny valley isn't a loud, violent alarm. It's a quiet, persistent whisper that says, this is not right. This is not for you. And so, you back away, silently, keeping to the shadows. You don't want to attack them. You don't want to befriend them. You just want to get away. This is the hidden terror of the uncanny valley. It's not just about a monster that wants to eat you. It's about the possibility that you could be looking at another human being, and your most primal instincts would be telling you they are a threat. It's the sickness of sameness, the fear that a small, imperceptible variation can be the signal of a profound and dangerous difference. And for a world of small, isolated tribes, that fear was a powerful evolutionary driver, a force that shaped our social interactions and in some cases might have even determined who lived and who died. It's the silent biological foundation of every single prejudice you will ever feel. The unease from the last section, the feeling of encountering a tribe that was subtly, unsettlingly off, now takes on a name: Neanderthal. You're no longer a lone hunter, but part of a small group of Homo sapiens migrating through a new and unfamiliar territory. The landscape is colder, the air thinner, and the forests are denser. You've heard whispers of the others, a different kind of human that lives in these lands, and you've told stories around the fire about their strange grunts and their powerful bodies. But a story is just a story. The reality is something else entirely. A mainstream historical fact. For thousands of years, modern humans coexisted with Neanderthals in Europe and Asia. The archaeological record shows that they were sophisticated tool users, skilled hunters, and lived in family groups just like you. They were not the brutish, simple creatures of later folklore, but they were different. Their skulls were longer and flatter, with a prominent brow ridge and a larger nose. Their bodies were stockier, more muscular, and better adapted to the cold. These were not the subtle genetic variations of an isolated tribe. These were the profound, fundamental differences of a separate species, and when you first saw one, your brain was not prepared. You're at the edge of a deep valley looking down at a small camp. The smoke from a fire rises in a lazy plume. You can see figures moving around, a family just like yours. A child plays with a stick, a woman tends to the fire, and a man is sharpening a stone tool. For a fleeting second, it feels normal. Then the man turns, and you get a full view of his face. The prominent brow ridge casts his eyes in deep shadow. His jaw is wide, his chin almost non-existent. The nose is a broad, flat expanse on his face. He is a human, without a doubt. He walks on two legs. His hands are dexterous, he uses tools, but his face is all wrong. It's a textbook example of the uncanny valley, a living, breathing testament to the idea that a slight deviation from the familiar human form can trigger a deep and profound revulsion. Historians still argue whether the relationship between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals was primarily one of conflict or coexistence. But what we're talking about here is not a rational, conscious decision to fight or befriend. It's a gut-level, non-verbal response. Your brain, having evolved to recognize and recoil from signs of illness or genetic abnormality, would have seen the Neanderthal face as a composite of every single warning sign. The heavy brow, the strange jawline, the nose, all of it would have screamed, "This is not one of us. This is a threat." Not a threat of violence, but a threat to your biological understanding of the world. It's like seeing a doll come to life. You know it's not a real person, but the mere fact that it's moving and breathing is a violation of a fundamental rule you thought you understood. For a quirky or fringe tidbit, consider this. What if the Uncanny Valley response was a key factor in the eventual disappearance of the Neanderthals? Maybe it wasn't a question of intelligence or hunting prowess. Maybe it was a simple, biological aversion. Perhaps our ancestors were less likely to interbreed with Neanderthals because of this unconscious revulsion. We know from genetic evidence that some interbreeding did occur, but maybe the Uncanny Valley limited it. The feeling of wrongness would have made it difficult to form the intimate bonds necessary for procreation. It's a gentle, sleepy kind of exclusion, an aversion that operates on a level below conscious thought. You don't hate them, you just don't want to get close to them. You probably wouldn't survive an encounter with a Neanderthal tribe if your first reaction was to attack them. But what if your first reaction was simply to recoil, to pull back, to avoid contact? It would have been a slower, more passive form of survival of the fittest. Over time, as our populations grew and their populations dwindled, that psychological barrier would have ensured that we remained separate. We didn't have to kill them, we just had to be uncomfortable with them. The Uncanny Valley, then, is a powerful social tool. It's a bit like a modern-day social awkwardness, amplified to a life-or-death scale. Imagine trying to make small talk with someone whose face instinctively makes you uncomfortable. You would want to end the conversation as quickly as possible. Now imagine that on a tribal level. There would be no shared stories around the fire, no collaboration on a difficult hunt, just a deep, abiding sense of unease. The shadows around the fire, the clay figures you made, the distorted reflections in the water, they were all a prelude to this moment. All those smaller, more controlled encounters with the uncanny were a dress rehearsal for the main event. Your brain was being trained, honed, and sharpened to recognize the difference between you and the other. The Uncanny Valley wasn't just a biological warning about sickness. It was a psychological border patrol, an unconscious guardian of the gene pool. It was the biological foundation of the idea of us and them. And in the long, slow, quiet process of human evolution, that feeling of unease might have been the most powerful weapon of all. As you back away from the ledge, your heart pounding in your chest, you realise that you didn't feel fear in the traditional sense. You didn't feel the adrenaline-fueled terror of a predator. You felt something much colder, much more profound. You felt a deep, abiding sense of wrongness. You were looking at a living, breathing human being, and your most ancient instincts were screaming, "This is a corrupted file, do not engage." And so you didn't. You turned and walked away, and in doing so, you might have just solidified the fate of an entire species. The feeling of unease has been with you for a while now. You've seen it in the subtle wrongness of an isolated tribe's faces, and in the profound biological chasm between yourself and a Neanderthal. Now, you're back in the cave, the fire crackling a familiar, comforting rhythm. But the Uncanny Valley isn't gone. It's simply taken on a new, more intentional form. You watch as a tribal elder, the same one who shaped the clay figure from earlier, now takes a different kind of material. A carved piece of wood, a slab of stone, and begins to craft a mask. This isn't a mask to hide a face. This is a mask to create a new one. This is a mainstream historical fact. Ancient cultures across the globe developed elaborate masks for rituals, ceremonies, and storytelling. These weren't just decorative objects. They were transformative tools. The wearer of the mask wasn't just a person in a costume. They were a vessel for a spirit, an ancestor, or a deity. The masks themselves were often stylized, with exaggerated features, wide mouths, and empty staring eyes. They were intentionally designed to push the human face out of the realm of the familiar and into the territory of the sacred or the terrifying. They were the ultimate tool for harnessing the Uncanny Valley. For a quirky or fringe tidbit, consider the shamanic rites of ancient societies. The shaman was often an intermediary between the human world and the spirit world. To do this, they needed to become other. They might wear animal skins, paint their faces with strange symbols, or most potently wear a mask. The mask wasn't just a disguise. It was a way of inducing the uncanny in the onlookers. The tribal members would look at their shaman and see a being that was almost human but not quite. The familiar body of a trusted friend was now topped with the impassive, unsettling face of a god or a spirit. This psychological shift, the deliberate violation of what is familiar, was a key part of the ritual. It prepared the minds of the onlookers to accept the impossible, to believe in the unseen. The uncanny valley, once a source of terror, was now a gateway to the divine. Historians still argue whether these masks were primarily for spiritual communication or social control. But watching the shaman, you see it's both. The fear and awe you feel aren't mutually exclusive. The uncanny nature of the mask instills a profound respect for the shaman's power. It makes you believe that they are no longer just a person, but a conduit for something far greater. The mask's blank stare tells you that the shaman has left their body and their soul is communing with something else. It's a masterful psychological trick, a way of using our most primal fears against us for a higher purpose. The uncanny valley is no longer a biological alarm. It's a ceremonial key, a controlled plunge into the disturbing to achieve a deeper understanding of the world. You probably wouldn't survive an ancient world where you couldn't tell friend from foe, where the line between human and not human was constantly blurred. The masks, ironically, helped you survive by giving that blurring a purpose. They taught you that the uncanny wasn't just a random occurrence. It was a deliberate act, a form of communication. It gave you a vocabulary for things that were off, and made them part of the culture instead of just a source of anxiety. Think of it like a safety drill. The tribe would gather, the shaman would put on the mask, and everyone would experience that brief, unsettling moment of the uncanny. But because it was in a controlled environment, surrounded by the warmth of the fire and the familiar faces of your kin, you learn to manage the feeling. You learn to see it not as a warning of danger, but as a signal of something important, something sacred. It's a bit like how we watch a horror movie today. We get that jolt of fear, that primal scream of danger, but we do it from the safety of our couch, knowing it's not real. Our ancestors were doing the same thing, but for much higher stakes. And this feeling, this dance with the uncanny, permeated every aspect of their lives. It wasn't just about the shaman and the mask. It was about the effigies of ancestors, the totem poles, the figurines meant to ward off evil spirits. These were all intentional trips into the uncanny valley, all designed to leverage that biological fear for a cultural purpose. Remember those simple clay figures from the last section, the ones that were so abstract they avoided the uncanny? The masks are the next evolution. They are a deliberate embrace of it. The masks are saying, I know what you're afraid of, and I'm going to show it to you in a way that gives me power over you. So you sit there, in the firelight, watching the ritual unfold. The shaman is now speaking in a low, guttural voice, a sound that doesn't quite match the human mouth you know is hidden behind that wooden facade. The mask's blank eyes seem to follow you, to see right through you. The feeling of revulsion is there, but it's tempered by awe. You're no longer just a hunter-gatherer. You're part of a shared, terrifying and sacred experience. The uncanny valley, once a silent biological alarm, is now a loud, powerful and deliberate social tool. It's the language of spirits, the key to the unknown, and a powerful reminder that our deepest fears can also be our most powerful sources of inspiration. The ceremonial masks of the last section gave you a taste of the intentional uncanny, a controlled plunge into the disturbing for a higher purpose. But now you find yourself on a different kind of hunt, one where the uncanny is not a spiritual tool but a practical, and perhaps even more unsettling one. You're no longer in a cave, you're stalking through a field, the tall grasses rustling around your legs. A deer, a beautiful male with a magnificent rack of antlers, is grazing in the distance. You need to get closer, but the wind is against you and the open ground offers no cover. Your tribal elder, a seasoned hunter, has a plan. He kneels down, pulls a small, unassuming bundle from his bag and begins to unwrap it. Inside the bundle is something that makes the hair on your arm stand up. It's a lifelike effigy of a young deer, a hunter's lifeless doll. The body is a simple frame of sticks and sinew, but the head is a masterpiece of prehistoric craftsmanship. It's a real deer skull stripped bare, its empty eye sockets staring out at you. Attached to the skull are antlers, and the whole thing is covered in a tanned deer hide, carefully shaped and stitched to resemble the real thing. It's not a perfect replica, but it's close enough to fool a deer, and it's close enough to send a shiver down your spine. This is a mainstream historical fact, though perhaps a sleepy one. Early humans used decoys and blinds to hunt animals. The use of animal hides and effigies was a common and effective hunting strategy. But what we're focusing on here is the psychological impact of these objects, particularly when they mimic a human, or, in this case, a living creature. The effigy of the deer, with its dead eyes and the very realness of its skull, pushes it into the uncanny valley for you, the human hunter. It's a thing that looks like a living thing, but you know it's not. It's the ultimate psychological paradox. Historians still argue whether these decoys were simply practical tools or held some spiritual significance. But you, watching the hunter, see the dual nature of the object. It is a tool, yes. He holds it in front of him, mimicking the slow, grazing movements of a real deer. He moves slowly across the field, his body hidden by the tall grasses, the effigy bobbing in front of him. From a distance to the real deer, it must look perfectly convincing. But to you, standing just a few feet away, it looks like a dead animal has come to life. The wind rustles the hide, making it twitch and ripple, and the empty eye sockets seem to stare at nothing. It's an unsettling, stomach-turning sight. Now for a quirky or fringe tidbit. What if the psychological unease of the hunter's doll wasn't just a byproduct of the hunting process, but an intentional part of the training? What if young hunters were taught to handle these unsettling objects, to acclimate themselves to the feeling of the uncanny, so that they wouldn't be paralysed by fear if they ever saw something truly unnatural in the wild? The hunter's doll becomes a psychological training ground, a way of building mental resilience. You're forced to confront the uncanny valley, to hold it in your hands, to use it as a tool. You learn to compartmentalise the fear, to push it aside in favour of the practical task at hand. It's a gentle form of exposure therapy, a way of desensitising yourself to the unsettling. You probably wouldn't survive a world where you couldn't control your fear. A hunter who freezes at the sight of a lifelike decoy would be a liability. The uncanny valley, once a biological alarm, is now a test. Can you push past the revulsion and focus on the task? Can you use the thing that scares you to your advantage? This is the moment where human intellect begins to truly master its own biology. We are no longer just reacting to the uncanny. We're creating it, controlling it, and using it for our own ends. It's a bit like a modern pilot learning to fly a simulated plane. The simulation is designed to be as real as possible, and it's meant to make you feel uncomfortable and stressed. But you have to push past that to learn the necessary skills. The hunter's doll was the original flight simulator. The uncanny valley, as we've seen, can be a warning sign, a ceremonial key, and now a test of will. It's a reminder that our deepest fears can also be our most valuable resources. The fear of the almost human can be a powerful motivator. It can be used to intimidate, to inspire, and to train. And for the hunter, it was a tool that could mean the difference between a full belly and an empty one. You watch the elder, still holding the effigy, as he slowly, carefully makes his way toward the deer. He's no longer just a man, he's a predator, a master of deception, a puppet master of the uncanny. He's taken the very thing that would make his heart pound and turned it into his most effective weapon. And what about that feeling from earlier? The one you had when you saw the almost human stranger on the plain? Now you have a name for it. It's not a nameless terror, it's the uncanny valley, and you've learned to use it. You've learned that you can create it, that you can control it, and that you can make it work for you. It's a humbling and powerful lesson. The fear doesn't go away. The sight of the lifeless doll still makes you uneasy. But you've learned to navigate that feeling. You've learned to see it as a signpost, not a stop sign. And in doing so, you've taken another small evolutionary step forward, a step that might just be the most important one yet. The hunter's decoy, that unsettling combination of the real and the artificial, has shown you how the uncanny valley can be a practical tool. But as you leave the hunting grounds behind, you find yourself in a different, more contemplative space. You're in a cave, not a place of shelter, but a gallery. The walls are not just rock, they're a canvas covered in the magnificent cave paintings of your ancestors. You run your hand over the cool, rough surface, your fingers tracing the outline of a mammoth, a bison, a running human figure. And it's here, in this silent, sacred space, that you find another subtler echo of the uncanny valley. A mainstream historical fact, ancient cave art, found in places like Lascaux and Altamira, is renowned for its stunning depictions of animals. The detail and realism in the renditions of bison, horses and aurochs are breathtaking. But the human figures are often strikingly different. They are stylized, simplified, almost abstract. They have thin, stick-like bodies, and their heads are often featureless or bird-like. They are not realistic portraits, they are icons. This stylistic choice is no accident. It is, we can argue, a deliberate avoidance of the uncanny valley. Historians still argue whether the artists of these paintings lacked the skill to draw realistic human figures, or if the stylization was a deliberate artistic choice. But our journey so far suggests the latter. Your ancestors were masters of observation. They knew how to render the exact curve of a bison's horn, the precise musculature of a galloping horse. It's ludicrous to think they couldn't draw a realistic human face. So why didn't they? Because they understood on a deep visceral level that a perfectly rendered human face, painted on a cave wall with ochre and charcoal, could become unsettling. It could fall into the valley. A human figure with empty staring eyes and an unnatural stillness could feel like a ghost, a bad omen, a corrupted spirit. For a quirky or fringe tidbit, consider the emotional impact. The cave paintings were likely used for ritual, for storytelling, for connecting with the spiritual world of the hunt. The animals were the source of a life, the spiritual equals of the hunters. The humans in the paintings were simply observers, participants in the ritual. By making the human figures abstract, the artist prevented the viewer from identifying too closely with them. You are a hunter, not the stick figure on the wall. The stick figure is just a symbol, a representative of the human presence in the great cosmic hunt. It's a way of saying, this is us, but it's not me. The uncanny valley is avoided, and in doing so the ritual is kept safe from the intrusion of personal fear. You probably wouldn't survive an ancient world where your sacred art made you feel a deep sense of dread. The art was meant to inspire, to teach, to connect you to something greater than yourself. The stick figure human allows the viewer's mind to fill in the blanks, to project their own identity onto the figure without the unsettling feeling of a static, lifeless, but realistic face staring back at them. It's a gentle form of psychological protection, a way of keeping the sacred space of the cave free from the creeping anxiety of the almost human. The cave is silent, but you can feel the weight of history in the air. You remember the unsettling clay figures from Section 2, the ones that were so simple and abstract they couldn't possibly be mistaken for a real person. The human figures in the cave paintings are the same kind of psychological maneuver, but on a grander scale. The hunter's decoy was a tool that pushed into the uncanny, a test of your mental resilience. The cave paintings are a tool that pushes away from it, a shield against the unsettling. They are two different strategies for dealing with the same fundamental fear. You trudge deeper into the cave, the light from your torch casting long dancing shadows on the walls. The air is cold and smells of earth and time. You pass by a painting of a great bull, its eye a perfect knowing circle. It feels alive. You pass by a human figure, its face a blank simple circle. It feels like a symbol. This distinction, this clear line drawn by our ancestors between the realism of the animal and the abstraction of the human, is a powerful and humbling insight into their minds. They understood, on a level we are only now beginning to comprehend, that the greatest source of fear and revulsion was not the beast outside the cave. It was the corrupted version of ourselves. The uncanny valley, then, is a lens through which we can view the entirety of human history. It's not just about robots and CGI. It's about why we draw the way we do, why we tell the stories we tell, and why we feel the way we do when we look at certain things. The cave paintings are a testament to our ancestors' wisdom, a silent reminder that they understood the power of a single unsettling glance. They chose to draw the lines of humanity not with precision, but with a simple, elegant refusal to get too close to the edge of the uncanny. And in doing so, they created a world where art could be a source of wonder, not a source of fear. The stylized human figures in the cave paintings have shown you that our ancestors instinctively avoided the uncanny. But now you're not in a gallery, you're in the open air, on a high bluff overlooking a valley. The wind whips at your face and the sun is beginning to set, painting the landscape in long dramatic shadows. You're standing with your tribe, and they are not just looking at the view, they are looking at a valley's silent guardian. It's a totem pole, a crude sculpture carved from a gnarled piece of wood, its top shaped into a rough approximation of a human head. The eyes are just two gouged out holes, and the mouth is a simple horizontal slit. It is not beautiful. It is not welcoming. It is, in fact, deeply, profoundly unsettling, and that is its purpose. This is a mainstream historical fact. Ancient cultures used totems and statues to mark territory, ward off enemies, and protect sacred places. These objects were not just symbols. They were believed to have a protective, often magical power. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that the more unsettling the totem was, the more effective it might have been. The Uncanny Valley, once a source of internal unease, has now become an external tool of intimidation. The totem pole isn't meant to inspire awe or respect in your tribe. It's meant to inspire fear and revulsion in your enemies. It's a psychological weapon. Historians still argue whether these totems were primarily for spiritual protection or for practical deterrence. But you, standing there, feel the dual nature of the object. To you, it's a familiar figure, one your tribe has put there to protect you. You know the woodcarver who made it. You watched him work. But you also know that to a stranger, a member of another tribe who might be venturing into your territory, this thing would be a powerful deterrent. It's too human to be a natural part of the landscape, but too alien to be a welcoming presence. The vacant eyes, the unsettling stillness, the almost but not quite human face. All of these elements work together to send a clear message. This place is not for you. This place is protected by something that is not quite right. The Uncanny Valley is now a fortress wall. It's a way of saying without words that this territory is off limits. You probably wouldn't survive a world without clear boundaries. Conflict over resources, hunting grounds, and water sources was a constant threat. The silent guardian, with its unsettling face, was a way of avoiding that conflict. It was a preemptive strike, a psychological barrier that said, "Turn back now." There is something here you don't want to mess with. This is the evolution of the Uncanny Valley from a passive fear into an active weapon. Our ancestors discovered that the thing that made them most uncomfortable could also be used to make others uncomfortable. It's a gentle, sleepy kind of coercion, a soft power version of a threat. The totem pole doesn't have a spear, but its blank, terrifying stare is just as effective. It's the difference between a loud scream and a quiet, persistent whisper. The scream says, "I am a threat." The whisper says, "Something here is wrong, and you don't want to find out what." The feeling you have is a mixture of pride and unease. Pride, because you know your tribe has created a powerful tool. Unease, because you're still a human being, and the face on the totem pole, even though you know its purpose, still makes your skin crawl a little. It's a perfect example of a psychological paradox. You're using the very thing that scares you to scare others. The Uncanny Valley has become a mirror, reflecting your own fears back at the world. Think about the psychological impact on the stranger who stumbles upon this totem. They've been walking for days, and they're tired, hungry, and on edge. They see this object in the distance. Their brain, which has been honed over millennia to detect the subtle signs of sickness, genetic abnormality, and other hominid species, immediately flags it as a red alert. The object is a human figure, but it's not moving, it's not breathing, and its face is wrong. The stranger's first thought isn't, "This is a piece of art." It's, "What in the name of all that is holy is that?" And this is where the genius of the totem lies. The stranger doesn't need to know its purpose. They just need to feel the fear. They need to feel the revulsion. The Uncanny Valley does the rest. It's an unspoken agreement between predator and prey, between tribe and stranger. The silent guardian is not a threat of violence. It's a threat of the unknown. And in a world where the unknown could mean death, that was the most powerful threat of all. As the sun dips below the horizon and the totem pole becomes a dark, foreboding silhouette against the dying light, you feel a quiet satisfaction. Your tribe is safe, not because you have the strongest spears or the largest numbers, but because you have mastered the art of psychological warfare. You have taken a primal fear and turned it into a weapon. You have weaponized the uncanny, and in doing so you have carved out a small, safe corner of the world for yourself. A place where you can sleep soundly, knowing that your silent guardian is out there, watching over the valley, its empty eyes full of a powerful and terrifying warning. You've seen the Uncanny Valley as a biological warning, a cultural tool, and a psychological weapon. But now, you're experiencing it not as an encounter with the living, but as a chilling communion with the long dead. You're on a silent, somber patrol with a small group of hunters, tracking a rare, large antlered deer. Your quarry's trail leads you into a deep, secluded ravine, a place your tribe has always avoided. The air is still, and a strange quiet hangs over the landscape, a silence deeper than the absence of sound. It's the kind of quiet that feels like a weight, a heavy blanket of dread. As you round a corner, you see it. It's not a totem or a decoy. It's the remains of another tribe, one your elders spoke of in whispers. You are in the heart of a mass burial site, the graveyard of a lost tribe's ghosts. This is a mainstream historical fact, though a spooky one. The remains of ancient hominid species and isolated early human groups have been found in remote locations. These discoveries, when made by other humans, would have been profoundly unsettling. The skeletons, half buried in the earth, would have been immediately recognizable as human, but with subtle, crucial differences. The skulls might be a different shape, the limbs a slightly different length, the bone structure a little too heavy or too light. These were not the bones of your kin. These were the bones of people who were almost but not quite like you. Historians still argue whether the discovery of such sites would have been seen as a spiritual or a practical event, but you, standing there in the cold, silent ravine, feel the powerful psychological impact. Your brain, which has been honed to recoil from the uncanny in the living, now has to process it in the dead. The sight of these bones, so similar to your own but with subtle, unnerving differences, is a profound jolt to your senses. It's a physical representation of the uncanny valley. The bones aren't sick, they aren't hostile, they aren't even alive. But they trigger the same alarm bells. They are a corrupted file, a glitch in the pattern of what is human. They are the ultimate embodiment of almost but not quite. For a quirky or fringe tidbit, imagine that this discovery could have been the origin of ghost stories. The ghost of an ancestor wasn't just a spiritual idea, it was a physical one. The sight of a skull with a slightly too large brow ridge, or a jaw that's just a little off, could have been interpreted as the spirit of a deformed or monstrous being. The uncanny wasn't just a feeling, it was a physical presence, a chilling reminder of a genetic wrongness. The stories of spirits with twisted limbs or unnaturally large heads could have been born from a hunter stumbling upon the skeletal remains of a group that had fallen into the uncanny valley due to genetic isolation or a unique mutation. The revulsion you feel isn't just about the dead, it's about the idea that there are other kinds of human out there, and some of them are profoundly biologically wrong. You probably wouldn't survive a world where the distinction between the living and the dead was always clear. The uncanny valley in this case blurred that line. It made the dead feel unnervingly alive, a presence in the landscape that was both familiar and utterly alien. The bones were not a source of sadness or a cause for a burial ritual. They were a source of profound unease. They were a threat not to your body but to your mind. They were a silent, terrifying reminder that your own kind, your own species, was not the only one. This is the uncanny valley as a source of folklore, a wellspring of myth and superstition. The fear of the strange, twisted bones of a lost tribe became the fear of ghosts, spirits, and demons. It's a fascinating and sleepy sarcastic kind of irony, isn't it? The very thing that was meant to protect you, the ability to recognize genetic anomalies, became the thing that created your most enduring supernatural fears. You didn't invent ghosts out of thin air. You found them in a ravine, in the unsettling remains of people who were almost, but not quite, like you. The air in the ravine grows colder, and the shadows lengthen. You and your hunting party quietly back away, your mission to track the deer forgotten. The memory of the unsettling bones is more potent than the promise of a meal. You have a new story to tell around the fire, a new fear to pass down to your children. The story of the lost tribe, the people with the strange empty eyes, the people whose bones lie in a silent ravine, a monument to the unsettling power of the uncanny. The uncanny valley, once a psychological barrier, has now become a bridge to a world of superstition. It's the moment when the biological and the supernatural collide. The fear of a sick person becomes the fear of a demon. The unease at a distorted face becomes the terror of a ghost. The silent, non-verbal warning becomes a loud, screaming narrative that will echo through generations. And as you walk away from that silent graveyard, you know, with a chilling certainty, that the uncanny is not just a part of your world, it's a part of your very soul, a ghost in your genetic machine. It's a feeling that will haunt you for the rest of your life, a whisper from the dead that says, We were here, and we were not like you. The ghostly remains of the lost tribe have left a cold, lingering fear in your mind. The uncanny valley is no longer just a physical sensation. It has taken on a spiritual dimension. You are no longer just a hunter. You are a storyteller, a myth maker. The psychological unease you felt from those unsettling bones is now the foundation of the first supernatural beliefs, the birth of superstition. A mainstream historical fact, every ancient culture has its own pantheon of spirits, ghosts and demons. These beings are rarely, if ever, perfect copies of humans. They are almost always described with some kind of physical flaw or distortion. A ghost might have an unnaturally long neck, a demon might have eyes that glow in the dark, a spirit might walk with a strange loping gait. This is not a coincidence. This is the uncanny valley made manifest. It's the biological fear of the almost human made into a cultural narrative. You probably won't survive a world where you can't make sense of your fears, and your ancestors learned to make sense of the uncanny by giving it a name and a story. Now for a quirky or fringe tidbit, consider the concept of the doppelganger, or the evil twin. This is a figure that is an exact replica of a person, but with some subtle, terrifying difference. In folklore, a doppelganger is often a sign of bad luck or impending death. This fear of a perfect but wrong copy is the uncanny valley in its most potent form. It's the ultimate psychological paradox. The thing that looks exactly like you, but isn't you, is the most terrifying thing of all. This fear of the perfect copy could have been born from a simple misperception. A hunter walking through a thick fog sees a figure that looks exactly like his hunting partner, but it's not quite right. It doesn't move quite the same way, or its face seems just a little off. He runs back to his camp terrified, and the story of a spirit that mimics the living is born. The uncanny valley isn't a physical reality in this case. It's a trick of the mind, a glitch in our perception, that gives birth to an entire genre of supernatural belief. Historians still argue whether supernatural beliefs are a product of fear or a way of explaining the unexplainable. But our journey suggests it's a bit of both. The uncanny valley provides the fear, the raw material, and the mind provides the story, the narrative that makes sense of the fear. The unsettling feeling you got from the lost tribe's bones, for example, could be explained away by a story of a curse or a spiritual malady. The uncanniness of a sick person could be blamed on a possession by an evil spirit. The uncanny valley, then, is a blank slate, a canvas upon which our ancestors painted their most terrifying beliefs. You sit around the fire telling the story of the lost tribe. You describe the bones, the strange way their skulls were shaped, the unsettling feeling they gave you. Your words are a translation of a biological response into a cultural myth. Your tribe members, listening intently, feel a shiver of their own. They understand the fear, not because they've seen the bones, but because they have felt the uncanny in other forms. They have seen the unsettling clay figures, the masks, the hunter's decoys. They have felt the quiet dread of the almost human. The uncanny valley is the shared language of their fear, and your story is a masterclass in speaking it. And this feeling, this terror of the not quite right, has a kind of gentle, sleepy sarcasm to it, doesn't it? The very thing that made our ancestors so successful, their ability to detect and recoil from subtle imperfections, is the same thing that made them believe in ghosts and goblins. We are a species built on paradox. We are simultaneously the masters of our environment and the slaves of our own irrational fears. And those fears, those quiet whispers of dread, are what led to the most enduring and powerful stories we have ever told. The uncanny valley, in this sense, is not just a scientific concept. It's a mythological one. It's the source of every ghost story you have ever heard, every demon you have ever imagined, every monster that has ever haunted your dreams. It's the moment when the rational mind, confronted with something it cannot comprehend, chooses to believe in the supernatural. It's the birth of superstition, born not from ignorance, but from the profound, unsettling wisdom of our own biology. So as you drift off to sleep, remember this. The ghosts that haunt our world are not phantoms from another dimension. They are the echoes of a deep biological fear. They are the twisted faces of the lost tribe, the unsettling stillness of the hunter's doll, the empty eyes of the ritual mask. They are the uncanny valley, and they are not a source of danger, but a source of wonder. They are a testament to our ancestors' beautiful, terrifying ability to turn their greatest fears into their most enduring myths. The ghost stories and superstitions born from the Uncanny Valley now feel like a natural part of the world. But our journey isn't just about how our fears became myths. It's about how those myths shaped our tools. You're no longer in a ravine or a cave. You're now at a small prehistoric workshop, a place where stone is chipped, wood is carved, and ideas are given physical form. You see a hunter working on a spear, its tip a beautifully crafted obsidian point. It's sharp, elegant, and perfectly symmetrical. It's a tool of death, but it's also a work of art. And beside it, something else is being made. It's a small, stylized figurine carved from bone. It has a head and a torso but no limbs, and its face is just two small holes for eyes. It is abstract, unsettling, and powerful. These are the tools of a twofold nature, a mainstream historical fact. Early humans created both functional tools and symbolic objects. The functional tools, like spear points and scrapers, were designed for efficiency and precision. They were elegant in their form because that elegance made them more effective. The symbolic objects, like the figurines and carvings, were often crude, abstract, and almost unnerving in their simplicity. They were not made for practical use, but for spiritual or social purposes. You probably won't survive an ancient world where you can't make the right tool for the right job, and our ancestors intuitively understood the difference between a tool for a purpose and a tool for a belief. Historians still argue whether the division between art and function was a conscious one for our ancestors. But our story suggests that the Uncanny Valley was a key driver. The spear point is meant to be perfect. Its perfection gives you confidence. Its symmetry tells you it will fly straight, that it will not shatter on impact. There is no room for the uncanny in a weapon. A spear with a lumpy, imperfect tip would feel like a corrupted file, a glitch in the very thing that is meant to protect you. A quirky or fringe tidbit. Perhaps the pursuit of perfect symmetry in our tools was a psychological side effect of our aversion to asymmetry in other humans. We sought perfection in our tools to compensate for the fear of imperfection in ourselves and others. We needed to create things that were entirely right to balance out the things that were wrong. Now look at the bone figurine. It is the opposite of the spear point. It is not symmetrical. Its features are not precise. It is an intentional rejection of perfection. It is a tool for a different kind of purpose. It is meant to evoke a feeling, to connect you to a spiritual world, to serve as a charm or a totem. And to be effective at that job, it needs to be unsettling. It needs to fall squarely into the uncanny, to feel like something that is almost human, but not quite. It's the difference between a medical diagram of a human body, which is clear and precise, and a voodoo doll, which is crude and unsettling. One is a tool for understanding, the other is a tool for belief. And our ancestors, with their uncanny valley-tuned brains, understood the distinction on a profound, non-verbal level. The workshop is a testament to the dual nature of our minds. We're capable of creating things of perfect, terrifying efficiency and things of crude, unsettling symbolism. Both are tools. One helps us survive in the physical world, the other helps us survive in the psychological one. The Uncanny Valley, then, is not just a fear, it's a creative engine. It's what drove our ancestors to perfect their tools and to make their symbolic objects purposefully imperfect. It's a quiet, persistent whisper in the mind that says, create things that are right and create things that are wrong, because both are necessary. You trudge through the mud, a spear in one hand and a small bone figurine in the other. One is a tool for a hunt, the other is a tool for a prayer. The spear feels solid and comforting in your hand. The figurine feels light and unsettling. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen, how it was both a practical tool and a psychological one. These two objects, the spear and the figurine, are the same. They are a reflection of a mind that is both rational and irrational, both pragmatic and superstitious. And in that duality, you see the very essence of what it means to be human. The Uncanny Valley has, in a way, shaped the very fabric of our culture. It's the reason we have both science and superstition, both logic and myth. It's the reason we build things that are perfect and things that are beautifully flawed. It's the engine of our creativity, and it's a testament to the fact that we are a species that has to make sense of the things that scare us, even if that means creating more things to be scared of. And as you walk, you feel a quiet, sleepy satisfaction. You are no longer just a hunter, you are a creator, and in that act of creation you are both taming your fears and giving them a physical form. It's the ultimate paradox. a beautiful and unsettling dance between the human mind and the world it creates. The tools of a twofold nature have shown you the deep connection between our ancient fears and our craftsmanship. Now, you stand at the edge of a new kind of creation. You're not chipping stone or carving bone. You're standing on a windswept plain watching your tribe work, not on a tool but on a structure. It's a series of large stones, set upright in a circle, their surfaces rough and unworked. They are silent and imposing, a deliberate presence in an otherwise empty landscape. This is the valley's architectural echo, and it's a monument built not just of stone, but of a quiet, persistent unease. A mainstream historical fact. Ancient cultures across the globe constructed megalithic structures, from the standing stones of Stonehenge to the monolithic heads of Easter Island. These structures required immense effort and organisation. They were not just for shelter. They had a deeper, often spiritual purpose. A quirky or fringe tidbit is to consider what if these structures were, in part, an attempt to leverage the uncanny valley on a massive scale. The uncanny valley isn't just about the human face. It's about anything that is a little too familiar, a little too human-like, in an unnatural context. A standing stone, for example, is just a rock, but a field of them, standing upright like silent sentinels, begins to feel wrong. It feels like an echo of a human presence without the humans themselves. It's the ultimate architectural uncanny. Historians still argue whether these stone circles were for astronomical observation, religious rituals, or social gatherings. But you, standing there, feel the undeniable psychological impact. The stones are not alive, but they feel like they are watching you. They have a kind of silent, imposing presence that is both comforting and unsettling. They're too organised to be natural, but too raw to be truly man-made. They sit in that quiet, eerie space of the almost but not quite. They are a physical manifestation of a psychological state. The uncanny valley is no longer just about a single object. It's about an entire landscape, a whole world view. The stone circle becomes a sacred space, not just because of its purpose, but because of the feeling it evokes. It's a place where the familiar world of the natural landscape gives way to a kind of human-made uncanny. The stones, with their silent, imposing presence, remind you that this is not just a place to live, it's a place to worship. It's a place to commune with a power that is almost, but not quite, of this world. You probably won't survive an ancient world where you don't have places of reverence, places where you can connect with something larger than yourself. And the uncanny valley, with its ability to induce a sense of awe and unease, was the perfect tool for creating them. Think of it like this. A temple or a cathedral is a building, but a good one is also a psychological tool. The high ceilings, the echoing acoustics, the way the light filters through the stained glass. All of these elements work together to induce a feeling of awe, of being in the presence of something sacred. Our ancestors, without the benefit of arches and spires, used the uncanny valley to achieve a similar effect. They used the silent, imposing presence of the standing stones to create a space that felt both human and utterly alien. They used the echo of the human form in a non-human context to create a sacred place. The air around the stones is cold and smells of wet rock and ancient moss. You walk around the perimeter, your fingers brushing against the rough surface of the stones. You feel their stillness, their silence, their immense weight. They are a physical embodiment of a spiritual idea, a kind of architectural ghost. They are a testament to our ancestors' genius, a sleepy, sarcastic reminder that we have been using the uncanny valley to build our world for a very, very long time. And this feeling, this sense of an architectural echo permeates every aspect of your world. Is in the way your tribe's huts are arranged, in the way the burial mounds are shaped, in the way a single, impossibly straight path is carved through a forest. All of these things are a reflection of a mind that is both rational and irrational, both pragmatic and superstitious. They are a testament to our ability to take a primal fear and turn it into a foundation for our society. The uncanny valley is not just a concept, it is the very bedrock of our civilization. It's what drives us to create things that are both beautiful and unsettling, both comforting and terrifying. And in that, you see the true genius of the human mind, its ability to build a home not just for our bodies, but for our most ancient and enduring fears. The stones stand as a silent, powerful testament to the fact that we have always, and will always, live with the uncanny. The silent, unsettling standing stones of the last section have shown you how our ancestors used the uncanny valley in their architecture. But now, you're in a place where the uncanny takes on a new, more profound meaning. A burial site. You're not in a field of towering stones, but in a small, hidden cave. The air thick with the smell of dry earth and the weight of history. Laid out before you are the skeletal remains of your ancestors, but they are not just bones. They are surrounded by objects, tools, and personal effects. And beside one of the bodies you see something that makes your heart sink a little. A small, carefully carved figure made of wood. A crude approximation of a human being. This is the uncanny valley in its most intimate and personal form, the first funerary rites. A mainstream historical fact is that early humans, like the Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, practiced intentional burial. They laid their dead to rest with care, often including grave goods like tools, jewellery and personal items. This practice suggests a belief in an afterlife or a spiritual connection to the deceased. But a quirky or fringe tidbit is to consider what if these burial effigies were not just for decoration or spiritual comfort, but were also an attempt to navigate the uncanny valley of the dead. The dead body, as it begins to decay, can become a source of profound unease. The face becomes slack, the features distorted, the once familiar person becomes a disturbing, almost but not quite human thing. Historians still argue whether the purpose of these effigies was to represent the deceased or to serve as a placeholder for their spirit. But our story suggests a more complex psychological purpose. The dead body itself, in its transition from living to lifeless, is a journey through the uncanny valley. The person you knew is still there, but their eyes are empty, their skin is cold, and their stillness is unnatural. The revulsion you feel is a biological response to the reality of death, a raw, non-verbal warning that says, this is what happens when the life force leaves a body. The burial effigy, with its simple, abstract face, is a way of bypassing this unsettling phase. It's a way of saying, we remember the person as they were, not as they are now. It's a psychological tool, a way of smoothing the transition from a familiar person to a beloved ancestor. You probably won't survive an ancient world without a way to deal with death. The sheer psychological trauma of losing a loved one, and then having to deal with their decaying body would be immense. The funerary rites, then, are not just about honouring the dead, they are about protecting the living. The burial effigy, with its deliberate lack of realism, is a gentle, sleepy, sarcastic reminder that we are not burying a monster, we are burying a person. The effigy is a symbol, a stand-in for the person's soul, and its abstract nature ensures that it does not fall into the uncanny and become a source of fear. It is a way of holding on to the memory of the living without having to confront the reality of the dead. Think of it like this. When we make a simple stick figure drawing of a person, we are not trying to be realistic. We are trying to capture the essence of a person, the idea of them. The funerary effigy is the same. It is not meant to look like the person it represents. It is meant to feel like the person it represents. It is a tool for grief, a way of allowing the living to move on without being haunted by the unsettling image of the dead. It is the uncanny valley, a source of fear and revulsion, used as a tool for comfort and healing. You crouch by the grave, your hand hovering over the small wooden figure. It's so simple, so unthreatening. It's a profound contrast to the unsettling feeling you had when you saw the Lost Tribe's bones in the last section. Those bones were a physical embodiment of the uncanny. They were a source of terror and superstition. This effigy is the opposite. It is a deliberate rejection of that terror. It is a beautiful, if unsettling act of a mind that is trying to make sense of the incomprehensible. It is a testament to the fact that we are a species that is not just defined by its fears, but by its ability to transcend them. The uncanny valley, in this final act of our journey, is not a wall or a weapon. It is a bridge. It is the bridge between the world of the living and the world of the dead. It is the bridge between the reality of decay and the comfort of memory. And in the silent, solemn ritual of burial, you see the ultimate triumph of the human mind, its ability to take the most terrifying thing in the world, death, and make it a little less frightening by navigating the unsettling space of the uncanny with grace and wisdom. The funerary rites, with their simple, unthreatening effigies, have shown you how our ancestors navigated the uncanny valley of death. But as you leave the silent burial cave, you find yourself in a different kind of time, a time of expanding tribes and growing villages. The fear of the uncanny hasn't disappeared. It's simply shifting sands of fear, its shape changing to reflect the complexities of a new social order. The fear of a sick person, or an isolated tribe, is no longer the primary concern. The new fear is of the stranger, the outsider, the person who looks like you but is not of your tribe. A mainstream historical fact is that as early human societies became more complex and interconnected, trade routes and social networks expanded. Tribes that had been isolated for millennia began to encounter each other more frequently. This led to both cooperation and conflict. But a quirky or fringe tidbit is to consider what if the uncanny valley played a crucial role in these interactions. The feeling of unease at the almost but not quite human was a built-in psychological barrier to intertribal relations. The new challenge was to overcome that barrier. Historians still argue whether early human societies were inherently xenophobic or if they were willing to embrace outsiders. But our journey suggests that the fear of the uncanny was a powerful, biological force that had to be actively overcome. The uncanny valley, once a simple alarm bell, had to be retuned. The almost human now had to be recategorized not as a threat, but as a potential ally, a trading partner, or a new source of genetic diversity. You probably won't survive a world where every stranger is an enemy, and your ancestors had to learn to see past their initial biological revulsion to build a better life. Think of it like this. Your brain is a computer program that has been running on a single operating system for a very long time. The operating system says, if it looks human but isn't of your tribe, it is a threat. Now suddenly, you have to install new software. The new software says, if it looks human but isn't of your tribe, it is a potential resource. The installation is not easy. It requires you to consciously override your instincts, to look past the subtle differences in a stranger's face and see the shared humanity. It requires a kind of psychological leap of faith, a moment of cognitive dissonance where you say, my instincts tell me to run, but my mind tells me to stay. The uncanny valley became a social test. A tribe that could overcome their fear of the uncanny and outsiders would be more successful. They would have access to new resources, new ideas, and new genetic material. A tribe that couldn't would remain isolated, their gene pool stagnant, their resources limited. The uncanny valley, then, became a powerful driver of cultural evolution. It pushed our ancestors to become more tolerant, more adaptable, and more sophisticated in their social interactions. It forced them to question their own biology and to build a world based not just on instinct, but on reason and cooperation. You stand in a bustling marketplace, a place of trade and exchange. The air is filled with the smells of strange foods and the sounds of foreign languages. You see people with faces that are different from your own, their skin a different shade, their eyes a different shape. Your brain sends a small, quiet jolt of unease, a ghost of a feeling from a time when these differences would have meant danger. But you push it aside. You look at the woven basket in a stranger's hand, and you see the artistry. You look at the glint of a polished stone, and you see a new tool. You look at the smile on a stranger's face, and you see the shared humanity. The uncanny valley is still there, of course. It's still lurking in the shadows, waiting to be triggered. But its power has been diminished. It is no longer a stop sign. It is a suggestion. It is no longer a command. It is a quiet whisper. This transformation is not a coincidence. It is the culmination of everything we've talked about so far. The intentional use of the uncanny in art and ritual, the domestication of fear through myth and superstition, the creation of tools and architecture that both harnessed and transcended the uncanny. The uncanny valley in this new world has become a tool for self-improvement. It has become a reminder that we are a species that can and must learn to overcome its own fears. It's a sleepy, powerful lesson that the things we find most unsettling can also be the things that push us to become better versions of ourselves. And in that, you see the true genius of the human mind, its ability to take a biological weakness and turn it into a social strength. The fear hasn't gone away. It's just been redirected, reshaped, and refined into something new, something powerful, something that will help our species not just survive, but thrive. The sands of fear are still shifting, and you are learning to walk on them without getting lost. The shifting sands of fear have shown you that our ancestors learned to overcome the uncanny valley for social and evolutionary gain. But now, you're in a different era, a time of settled communities and burgeoning artistry. You're not a hunter or a nomad, but a craftsman, a sculptor, and you are about to confront the uncanny valley not in a practical way, but in a purely aesthetic one. You're not making a mask or a totem, you're making a statue, a representation of a human form so realistic it feels almost alive. This is the moment when the mind's eye blinks, a mainstream historical fact. As societies grew more complex, so did their art. The simple, stylized figures of the prehistoric era gave way to the stunning realism of classical Greek and Roman sculpture. The human form was rendered in marble and bronze with an obsessive attention to detail, from the ripples of muscle to the folds of a tunic. But a quirky or fringe tidbit is to consider what that process felt like for the artists. They were pushing the boundaries of what was psychologically comfortable. They were deliberately walking toward the edge of the uncanny valley, not to be a hunter or a spiritual leader, but to be an artist. Historians still argue whether the pursuit of realism was an intellectual or a spiritual one. But you, standing in your workshop, feel the emotional weight of it. You are chipping away at a block of marble, your hands and tools covered in a fine white dust. The face begins to emerge. The eyes are not just two gouged out holes, they are shaped with a subtle curve, their surfaces polished to a lifelike sheen. The lips are not just a slit, they are parted slightly, as if in the middle of a thought. The tension you feel is palpable, you're getting so close. You're creating something that looks so much like a person that you can almost feel it breathing. And then, it happens. A subtle mistake. A chip in the marble that creates a slight asymmetry in the face. A polished surface that is just a little too smooth, a little too perfect, a little too glassy. Your stomach turns. The statue is no longer a masterpiece. It's an imposter. It's a corrupted file. It's an almost human monster. It has fallen with a sickening thud into the uncanny valley. The very perfection you were striving for has become its greatest flaw. It is a terrifying and humbling moment. You have gone from a creator to a monster maker in a single, careless blow of a chisel. You probably won't survive a world where you can't learn from your mistakes. The pursuit of realism was a dangerous game. It was a constant dance with the uncanny. The artists who mastered it were not just technically skilled, they were psychologically resilient. They had to be able to work on a figure for months to pour their heart and soul into it, and then to step back and look at it with a cold, objective eye, the eye to see if it had fallen into the valley. And if it had, they had to be able to destroy it and start over. It was a kind of artistic masochism, a deliberate confrontation with a primal fear. This is the uncanny valley as a professional hazard. It's the sculptor's nightmare, the painter's dread, the actor's fear. The moment a performance feels not quite human, a moment a painted face seems just a little too flat. We, as a species, are drawn to realism, but we are also terrified of its imperfections. The uncanny valley is the great gatekeeper of art. It's a quiet, persistent whisper that says, you can get this close, but no closer. You can push the boundaries, but you cannot cross them. And the greatest artists are the ones who know exactly where that line is. The air in the workshop is still, and the only sound is the quiet echo of your heart beating in your chest. You stand before the statue, its beautiful, flawed face staring back at you with a kind of silent judgment. You remember the simple, abstract figures from the caves, and you realize their genius. They were not primitive. They were wise. They knew that the pursuit of perfection was a dangerous game, and they chose to stay on the safe side. You, with your advanced tools and your hubris, have dared to cross that line, and now you are paying the price. This is a sleepy, poignant moment. You're not in danger of being eaten by a predator or ostracized by your tribe. You're in a moment of quiet, internal struggle. You're fighting against your own biology, against the ancient programming that says, this is wrong. And in that struggle, you're not just a craftsman, you are an evolutionary pioneer. You are pushing the boundaries of what it means to be human, and you're doing it with a hammer and a chisel. It's a beautiful, terrifying, and profoundly human act. The uncanny valley, once a source of terror, is now a source of artistic inspiration. It is the challenge that pushes us to be better, to be more precise, to be more human in our art. And in the silent, imperfect face of your statue, you see the reflection of your own journey, a journey from a fear-driven species to a creative and ultimately self-aware one. You felt the mind's eye blink the moment when your pursuit of realism in a marble statue created an unsettling imposter. The uncanny valley, once a simple alarm bell, has become a high-stakes artistic challenge. But our journey isn't over. You're no longer in a prehistoric workshop or a cave. You're here, in the present, sitting in a dimly lit room, the screen in front of you glowing with a different kind of image. This is the valley, reimagined forever, a journey from a fear born of a Neanderthal's face to an anxiety about a robot's smile. A mainstream historical fact, the term uncanny valley was coined by Japanese roboticist Masahiro Mori in 1970. He hypothesized that our sense of familiarity with a robot's appearance increases with its human likeness, but only up to a point. After that point, even a slight imperfection in its human likeness can cause a sudden, sharp drop into a feeling of revulsion. This is the valley itself, a precipitous drop from almost human to creepy monster. The same feeling you felt when you saw the almost human stranger on the plane, or when you looked at the lifelike hunter's doll, or when your marble statue's face turned from beautiful to terrifying. The uncanny isn't new, it's a feeling as old as our species. We've simply found new things to apply it to. Now, for a quirky or fringe tidbit, think about the CGI in movies and video games. For decades, artists and programmers have been pushing the boundaries of realism, trying to create digital characters that are indistinguishable from real people. And time again, they've stumbled into the uncanny valley. Think of the early CGI characters from films like Final Fantasy, The Spirits Within, or the unsettlingly expressionless hero in The Polar Express. They were beautiful, technically impressive, but their eyes were a little too blank, their movements a little too stiff. They were digital echoes of the unsettling remains of that lost tribe, and they gave us the same primal jolt of revulsion. The uncanny valley isn't just a theory, it's a multi-billion-dollar problem for the entertainment industry. Historians still argue whether our fear of the uncanny is an evolutionary byproduct or a learned cultural response. But our journey suggests that it's both. The biological fear of a sick person or a different hominid species is the raw material. The myths, the art, the superstitions are the cultural narratives we've built to make sense of that fear. We have taken the raw, non-verbal fear of the almost human and given it a name. We have domesticated it. We have found ways to use it, to control it, and to even get a kind of artistic and psychological pleasure from it. It's a testament to the beautiful, terrifying ingenuity of the human mind. You probably won't survive a world where you can't tell the difference between what's real and what's not, and in our modern world that line is getting blurrier every day. We have robots that look like people, AI assistants with human-like voices, and digital characters that are almost, but not quite, perfect. The uncanny valley is a constant, quiet hum in the background of our technological revolution. It's the silent alarm that says, "Be careful. We're getting close to a line we might not want to cross." So, as you look at the screen, you see a final gentle lesson until... The uncanny valley is not a flaw in the human psyche. It is a feature. It is a built-in psychological defense mechanism that has helped us survive and thrive for millennia. It is the silent, non-verbal wisdom of our ancestors, a quiet whisper that says, remember the masks, remember the statues, remember the faces that were not quite right, and be cautious with the future you are building. The uncanny valley is a ghost, an echo, a memory, but it's a memory that lives in your genes, in your mind, and in every single piece of art and technology you have ever created. It's the one thing that will always and forever remind you of what it truly means to be human. Now, as the screen fades to black, and the final image of that beautiful flawed face fades from your mind, feel the softness of your pillow, the gentle rhythm of your own breathing. The journey is over, but the quiet wisdom it has imparted remains. Remember the flicker of the firelight, the cold touch of the stone, the silent hum of the uncanny. It's all a part of you, a part of what makes you, you. As you settle in, let the ancient fears and the modern anxieties fade into the background. Your mind is a fortress, and you have just spent a long, quiet night learning its most ancient and powerful secrets. You're safe now. You are home.